In 1908, the entire American League hit just 116 home runs combined. For perspective, in 2024, Aaron Judge nearly reached half that total by himself. Welcome to the Deadball Era, where baseballs literally came to die. Now, before we begin, I am not suggesting the Deadball Era was the greatest or dynamic. If I wanted to watch a low-scoring sport with no action, I would just watch any soccer game ever played. What we are talking about here is how this era in baseball is vital to the history of the game. I mean, come on. Without the Deadball Era, we may never see Harris from Major League rub a little jalapeno from inside his nose to load up the ball. And who doesn't love a little small ball from time to time? And maybe, just maybe, the golden age of baseball might not be so golden. Stick with me. I am going to convert you Deadball haters into believers. Well, that's probably not true, but at the very least, we can all appreciate how far the game has come and be thankful we didn't have to go through this era of baseball. Let's go. From 1900 to 1919, baseball endured what historians call the Deadball Era, a period when offensive production plummeted, strategy ruled supreme, and the same ball might be used for an entire game. These 2 decades fundamentally transformed America's pastime and set the stage for modern baseball as we know it. And let's just say it wasn't exactly the golden age of highlight reels. The term web gems would have referred to actual spiderwebs in outfielders' gloves. This era got its name for good reason. The ball was effectively dead. It traveled shorter distances, responded less to bat contact, and transformed baseball into a strategic battle where runs were manufactured rather than produced in explosive bursts. Think of it as baseball's version of a war of attrition where every base was earned through blood, sweat, and broken fingers from sliding headfirst into bases that were literally anchored into the dirt. A time when men were men, right? Well, let's see. Imagine playing baseball with equipment that deteriorated as the game progressed. Pitchers deliberately scuffed, cut, and spat on baseballs to make them move unpredictably. Outfield fences stretched seemingly to the horizon, making home runs nearly impossible feats of strength. It was like asking someone to hit a golf ball with a pool noodle while aiming for a target in outer space. The results? League-wide batting averages hovered around 250, with slugging percentages rarely exceeding 350. Teams averaged just 2 runs per game, and many contests ended 1-0 or 2-1. The 1908 White Sox won games despite hitting only 3 home runs all season. 3! Even below-average players today in their worst slumps could muster 3. Consider the 1908 season more closely. The league leader in home runs, the Brooklyn Superbass hit a grand total of 28 home runs as a team. The entire league combined for just 267 home runs, a number that would be considered unacceptable in modern baseball. The league batting average was a measly .239. The league leader in home runs was Brooklyn's Tim Jordan with, wait for it, 12 home runs. 12! Today, that would barely get you noticed in the minor leagues. And speaking of playing conditions, picture this scene. By the 7th inning, the baseball resembled something you'd find under your car after driving through a mud puddle. It might have scuff marks, tobacco stains, grass smears, and who knows what else ground into its increasingly loose leather cover. Pitchers would purposely rub it in dirt to make it even harder to see. The same ball might stay in play for 100-plus pitches until it was literally hit out of the park or became completely unraveled. Umpires were so stingy with new balls that losing one over the fence could actually result in a fine for the hitter. Talk about adding insult to injury. Stars weren't measured by power, but by their ability to manufacture runs through stolen bases, sacrifice bunts, and hit-and-run plays. This wasn't just a minor variation. It was baseball operating under entirely different metrics of success. Today's stat heads would need entirely new spreadsheets: WAR, OPS, and exit velocity. Try stolen bases, sacrifice hits, and the ability to leg out a bunt as the premium skills during this era. Players faced additional challenges beyond the field of play. Salaries averaged just $2,500 annually, forcing many to work winter jobs. Travel conditions were brutal, with teams sharing cramped train compartments between cities. The reserve clause bound players to their teams indefinitely, giving owners almost complete control over careers. Free agency? More like free to play wherever we tell you for whatever we decide to pay you. And let's not forget the physical toll. Players commonly dealt with broken fingers, spike wounds from aggressive slides, and countless bruises from hit by pitches that were often intentional. Batting helmets? Optional equipment that most real men refused to wear. Protective cups? A luxury. Playing through injury wasn't admirable. It was expected. The disabled list existed mainly as a formality, as players who couldn't perform simply lost their jobs to someone who could. Several factors defined this distinctive era. First, the physical ball itself was larger, softer, and less responsive than today's version. When a ball became discolored or misshapen, it remained in play, sometimes for hundreds of pitches. By the late innings, batters faced what amounted to a waterlogged, mud-covered lump. Imagine trying to hit a soggy potato with a broomstick. Now you're getting close to the deadball experience. The actual construction of the baseball played a huge role. Before 1920, baseballs contained a rubber core rather than the more responsive cork-centered balls that came later. The rubber core absorbed energy from bat contact rather than transferring it back, resulting in significantly less distance on hit balls. The wool yarn wrapped around this core was often of inconsistent quality, leading to balls with wildly different flight characteristics. The outer leather was hand-stitched and varied from batch to batch, further adding to the unpredictability. Bats were also dramatically different. Made from heavier, denser wood than today's models, Deadball era bats often weighed 40+ ounces compared to modern 32-ounce versions. These tree trunks required immense strength just to swing effectively, which is why players developed distinctive choked-up grips and shorter, more compact swings. Launch angle? Yeah, right. Exit velocity? Exit what? These players were just trying to make any contact at all with what amounted to wielding a telephone pole. The rules favored defense and pitching. Spitballs were legal until 1920, letting pitchers like Ed Walsh and Jack Chesbro dominate with doctored pitches that moved unnaturally. Mounds stood higher, giving pitchers a more pronounced downward angle. Modern batters complaining about sticky substances would have had an existential crisis watching pitchers openly hawking loogies onto baseballs. Let's talk about those spitballs for a minute. Pitchers didn't just apply saliva, they used tobacco juice, licorice, slippery elm, Vaseline, and even mud to alter the ball's movement. Some would scuff one side with a belt buckle or file to create asymmetrical air resistance. Others developed elaborate systems for hiding foreign substances, under cap bills, in gloves, or even in their hair. The most notorious practitioners, like Ed Walsh and Jack Chesbro, could make the ball dance as if it were possessed. Walsh threw his spitter so effectively he won 40 games in 1908 with a 1.42 ERA. 40 games! Modern pitchers complain about a 5-man rotation. Gloves were little more than padded leather, making spectacular defensive plays all the more impressive. Today's fielders with their space-age mitts would look at deadball gloves and assume they were being pranked. Early gloves had minimal padding and no webbing between fingers. They were designed primarily to protect hands rather than to facilitate catching, more like a gardening glove than modern equipment. Outfielders often played shallow because they couldn't reliably catch balls hit over their heads. Infielders developed techniques like short-hopping ground balls rather than trying to field them cleanly, as the tiny gloves made clean plays exceptionally difficult. Ballparks themselves shaped the era's style. Massive outfields in venues like Chicago's Southside Park and Pittsburgh's Forbes Field turned would-be home runs into routine fly balls. The cavernous Polo Grounds featured 450-foot power alleys where home runs went to die. These weren't ballparks so much as national parks with some bases scattered about. Take Philadelphia's Baker Bowl as an extreme counterexample. Its right field wall stood just 280 feet from home plate, but towered 60 feet high, like hitting in a bizarre asymmetrical shoebox. Boston's Fenway Park opened in 1912 with the Green Monster already in place, but its center field stretched to 488 feet at its deepest point. A genuine no man's land. Chicago's West Side grounds featured a center field that extended 560 feet from home plate. That's not a typo. 560 feet, or roughly the distance of an Aaron Judge home run plus a Shohei Ohtani home run combined. The playing surfaces themselves were atrocious by modern standards. Outfields weren't manicured carpets, but irregular terrain with patches of bare dirt, overgrown grass, and sometimes actual puddles after rain. Ground rules existed for balls that lodged in tall grass or disappeared into muddy patches. Infields were often rock hard, causing ground balls to take vicious hops that regularly resulted in facial injuries to infielders. Some players actually preferred rainy days because the softer ground was less likely to cause a ball to bounce up and break their teeth. Despite these limitations, extraordinary players emerged. Ty Cobb dominated with a lifetime .366 average, stealing 897 bases while rarely hitting for power. His approach wasn't just aggressive, it was borderline psychopathic. Cobb sharpened his spikes before games specifically to intimidate and potentially injure opponents on slides. He once beat up a groundskeeper for allegedly tampering with the field to disadvantage him. The Georgia Peach's batting stance and grip were unorthodox even by period standards, yet he compiled hitting statistics that remain untouched over a century later. Honus Wagner revolutionized shortstop play with unprecedented defensive range and consistent hitting. Despite having legs that more closely resembled tree trunks than typical athlete physiques, Wagner moved with startling agility. His massive hands allowed him to palm a baseball like a modern player might grip a tennis ball, making throws that defied the limitations of primitive gloves. At the plate, Wagner's approach was simple but effective. Hit the ball where fielders aren't. In an era when most players choked up on the bat, Wagner's hands stayed low on the handle, generating surprising power for the times. Pitching titans like Walter Johnson and Christy Mathewson recorded ERAs under 2.0 for entire seasons, sometimes throwing complete games on consecutive days. Modern pitchers get arm fatigue just reading about these guys' workloads. Johnson's sidearm delivery generated such velocity that catchers stuffed their mitts with raw steak to absorb the impact. No joke. The big train was so dominant that Ty Cobb once claimed facing Johnson's fastball was like a strawberry blonde coming right at you. Whatever that means, it clearly wasn't pleasant for hitters. Mathewson approached pitching as an intellectual pursuit, pioneering what he called the fadeaway, now known as the screwball. His pitching manual, Pitching in a Pinch, became the definitive text on the mental aspects of pitching. While most pitchers relied on raw stuff, Mathewson emphasized strategy, sequencing, and exploiting batter weaknesses, essentially inventing modern pitch planning decades before video analysis existed. The definitive turning point came through tragedy. On August 16, 1920, Cleveland shortstop Ray Chapman faced Yankees pitcher Carl Mays. The darkened, scuffed ball proved invisible against the late afternoon shadows. Chapman never saw the pitch that struck his temple, becoming the only MLB player to die from an on-field injury. The details of this moment still haunt baseball history. Mays, a submarine-style pitcher with a reputation for throwing at batters, delivered a high, tight fastball with a darkened, scuffed ball. Witnesses reported that Chapman never moved. He simply couldn't see the pitch coming. The sound of ball striking skull was so distinct that Mays initially fielded the rebounding ball, thinking it had hit Chapman's bat. Chapman initially stood, stunned before collapsing as blood poured from his ear. Despite emergency surgery, he died 12 hours later. The baseball community reacted with unprecedented alarm. Cleveland players openly accused Mays of intentionally throwing at Chapman, though most historians now believe poor visibility was the primary factor. Players attended Chapman's funeral en masse, and the tragedy catalyzed rule changes that had been resisted for years. This catastrophe forced baseball to confront equipment safety issues. A rule was immediately implemented, requiring umpires to replace soiled or damaged balls. The rule specifically noted that balls should be removed if they became discolored or damaged, a direct response to the conditions that contributed to Chapman's death. Simultaneously, Babe Ruth's unprecedented power hitting was revolutionizing fan expectations. In 1919, Ruth hit 29 home runs for Boston, more than any other American League team. After his sale to New York, Ruth hit 54 homers in 1920 and 59 in 1921, shattering previous concepts of offensive production. Imagine the Twitter explosion if that happened today. He must be juicing. Ruth's transformation from ace pitcher to slugging outfielder represented the perfect transitional figure between eras. He understood both sides of the game intimately, having been an elite pitcher before becoming baseball's premier power hitter. Ruth's swing, an uppercut that generated backspin and loft, was revolutionary for the time. Instead of chopping down at the ball to hit ground balls, Ruth actively tried to hit the ball in the air, a concept that wouldn't become analytical orthodoxy for nearly a century. The public's reaction to Ruth's power display can't be overstated. Attendance skyrocketed as fans flocked to see the Sultan of SWAT launch baseball's unprecedented distances. The Yankees' attendance more than doubled between 1919 and 1920, despite playing in the same stadium. Other teams actually scheduled their pitching rotations to ensure Ruth appeared in their ballparks, knowing he guaranteed sellout crowds. Manufacturing changes produced more responsive baseballs. Australian wool replaced lower-quality materials in the core, creating a livelier ball. Cork centers replaced rubber, adding significant elasticity. These weren't minor tweaks. Laboratory tests conducted decades later showed that the 1925 baseball traveled approximately 20 feet farther when struck with identical force compared to its 1910 counterpart. The league quietly standardized these specifications in 1925, though they never officially acknowledged creating a juiced ball. Baseball's first conspiracy theory was born, long before anyone blamed the Yankees for controlling the weather. Pitchers consistently complained about the new ball, with veterans insisting it flew farther and was harder to manipulate. league officials denied making any changes, despite clear evidence to the contrary. This pattern of manipulating equipment while publicly denying it would become a recurring theme throughout baseball history. Spitballs and other pitch doctoring became illegal. Umpires now routinely replaced scuffed balls. Parks installed more visible backgrounds behind pitchers. These changes collectively opened baseball's offensive floodgates and ended the deadball era forever. The statistics tell a dramatic story of transformation. In 1918, the American League averaged 3.62 runs per game. By 1925, that number had jumped to 5.55, a more than 50% increase. Home runs across baseball more than tripled between 1918 and 1925. A new era had decisively arrived, and there was no going back to the days when scoring 2 runs constituted an offensive explosion. Though the era ended, its impact reverberates through baseball history in unexpected ways. Modern baseball's obsession with small ball during certain periods represents nostalgia for deadball strategies. Every time a manager calls for a sacrifice bunt or hit and run, he's channeling the strategic genius of John McGraw and his contemporaries. The fundamental tension between offense and defense that defines baseball governance today was born in the aftermath of the deadball era. Every time MLB tweaks rules to increase offense, lowering the mound in 1969, implementing the designated hitter, or cracking down on foreign substances, they're responding to the same concerns that ended the deadball era: fan desire for more action and scoring. Deadball stars established archetypes that persist in baseball mythology. The aggressive base stealer, Ty Cobb, the defensive wizard shortstop, Honus Wagner, the crafty pitcher, Christy Mathewson, and the workhouse ace, Walter Johnson. These player types still define how we categorize modern stars. Whenever announcers praise a player for manufacturing runs or playing the game the right way, they're invoking deadball era values. The ballparks themselves left lasting legacies. While many dead ballparks have been demolished, their spiritual descendants live on. Fenway Park, though modified, remains fundamentally a deadball era creation. Its quirky dimensions, tight foul territory, and the green monster itself all reflect early 20th century pragmatic design, where parks were built to fit available urban plots rather than standardized dimensions. Even uniform design shows deadball influence. The tradition of road grays versus home whites originated in this period when laundry was less accessible during road trips and gray uniforms showed less dirt. Team logos became standardized during this time, with the Yankees' iconic interlocked NY first appearing in 1909. The practice of wearing numbers on uniforms wouldn't arrive until after the deadball era, making period photos of numberless players instantly recognizable as belonging to this foundational time. The era's strategic innovations remain part of baseball's core. The hit-and-run play, the sacrifice bunt, defensive shifts, and pitch sequencing all developed sophisticated forms during this period. When modern analytics departments discover optimal strategies, they sometimes unknowingly reinvent approaches McGraw and his contemporaries developed a century earlier. Perhaps most importantly, the deadball era established baseball's essential character as a game of adjustments and counter-adjustments. The constant evolution between offense and defense, between pitcher and batter, forms baseball's fundamental dynamic. When modern baseball introduced the pitch clock or banned extreme shifts, they participated in the same evolutionary process that began when deadball era hitters developed new techniques to combat dominant pitching. The deadball era's conclusion fundamentally altered baseball's trajectory. The game shifted from defensive strategy toward power hitting, transforming not just statistics, but the sport's cultural position. Without this pivotal transition, modern baseball, with its emphasis on home runs, specialized pitching, and advanced metrics, simply wouldn't exist. It's like baseball went from chess to pinball, and the sport never looked back. This transformation wasn't just about statistics or playing styles, it represented baseball's evolution from a local curiosity to America's national pastime. The deadball era laid the strategic foundation, while the offensive revolution that followed provided the excitement that captured mainstream attention. Together, they created the complete package that became modern baseball. As we watch today's game with its 100-mile-per-hour fastballs, 450-foot home runs, and computer-optimized strategies, we're seeing the culmination of changes set in motion over a century ago. The deadball era may be long gone, but its influence lives on in every aspect of baseball we enjoy today, even if we're thankful we don't have to watch 3-hour games that end with a score of 1-0. What aspect of deadball era baseball would you most want to see in today's game? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into baseball history, click the subscribe button and come back next Thursday. And remember, sometimes the most important part of history is learning to appreciate that you didn't have to live through it.